11 cast. Today we're welcoming Noah Lampert of the Synchronicity podcast. You can find all of his handles here, Instagram, Twitter, as well as podcast apps everywhere. Remember, time waits for no one. This is an 11-minute, 11-second podcast. How are you and what is your name?
Noah from Synchronicity podcast with Noah.
I didn't know. So, why were you named Noah?
My parents like the name.
Was it do you know the etymology or?
I know that it was not a particularly popular name when I was younger. That has subsequently changed in recent years and decades, but I think it was just because it was a 4-letter word, and it's a good name. I don't know. It's biblical.
So was your family like a little religious? It was
Not at all. Like the
really?
opposite. Like not like unreligious, but like pretty. Like they met at Bard College, which is where I live close to now. It's like super hippie-ish and like it's not traditional. Let's say.
Huh. Interesting. Because I imagine like someone with the name Noah come from a Christian background because Noah's Ark and
I'm Jewish. No, I'm Jewish.
Interesting.
I'm Jewish. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, but it's Old Testament, so that's all. It's
yeah.
all Judeo-Christian. Yeah.
Well, very interesting. And the name of your podcast is Synchronicity.
Yes.
And what was the inspiration behind that, or was there something that led you towards that name?
My wife gets full credit, Alexis, for coming up with the name. She had heard me talk about Synchronicity a lot. I was a big Carl Jung fan, but more importantly, I just was familiar with the experience of synchronicity and had extended periods of synchronicity over weeks and months that made me interested in it as not only just a word, but a phenomena. So I was like, all right, that's a good job, Alexis. So that's what I went with.
Yeah, and I think it's a great name for a podcast. It's simple and straightforward, but it's also something that people take notice of. When they get into more. I don't know. I'd say your podcast is kind of more in the imaginal realm, more like creative, and it's something that people kind of tune into when they're looking into different philosophies. So.
That's cool.
Very cool name. And from the podcasts I've heard, you had an experience. What year was it?
2003.
2003.
Thereabouts.
And that was. So what happened in brief?
In brief, I mean.
Yeah, it was a long time.
In brief, I took a nominal amount of LSD, which I had taken many times before, and basically didn't stop tripping for 3 months. And so it clearly wasn't the physiological effects of LSD, but I was just in this what I at the time referred to, or after, at the time I wasn't referring to anything, I was just experiencing it. But afterwards, I referred to it as an extended state of synchronicity. What I now refer to it as is just witnessing at a deeper level how reality actually works, which is our consciousness is constantly reflected back to us in external reality. So either stuff we have thought and felt and believed before is now being outpictured in our world, or if you get real close to it, almost immediately what you're thinking is projected in front of you. And that's what I experienced, and it kind of like, I was like 22, 23, kind of like broke my brain a little bit. Because like I didn't know how to process what was happening on a daily, and like it was sleep didn't, like in the dreams it would be the same thing. Like I couldn't get, it was just like this one continuous reality. So I kind of like suppressed that for 16 years or so, although being aware that it was a real thing that happened. And then I kind of popped those doors open with a greater understanding of what that was, and lo and behold, shit is good now.
So yeah, that's pretty concise. I've heard you tell the story on many different podcasts. I know you've been on Corey Allen's podcast and Michael Garfield and those people. But Yeah, I've had some similar experiences, and prolonged states of sort of almost manic, actually quite manic states, as where I just felt it's kind of a tricky, slippery slope because things can manifest when you're in those states, but there's also like it's a thin line to walk, where
Well, what happened to me is my ego, or what I thought of as my ego, which was just kind of a logical, analytical, doubting, protective mind came in and was like, no way. Like, you are getting real delusional. You are getting real crazy.
mm-hmm.
This isn't right. So I felt unbalanced. So the way I distinguish it is in a manic state, it's a state of unbalance or imbalance. And same thing with the depressive state, right? It's an imbalance, the other polarity.
Yeah.
But the manic state is close to perceiving the true nature of reality, but it creates a tension and schism with our consensus base level and our senses and like how we perceive reality there. And that can kind of like blow out the circuits of the mind and brain. The key is when you prove that like your imagination creates reality and that consciousness is really the only real thing in anything. When you do it for real, you don't feel manic. You don't feel panicked. You don't feel anxious. You don't feel worried. You don't feel paranoid. You don't feel like you're in doubt. You accept pretty much everything, like, and it's cool, and like you're good. And so that you use as your beacon for like, is this real? Because like here's the truth, like everyone is doing this all of the time. It's not like people are like, how do you click into like imagining what you want? Like it's like you're doing it. You're just become more aware that this is an operative principle because we can test it empirically. But I get like the manic things, and like I caution, like mental health is a sensitive issue, and I totally understand that. But I also think a lot of harm is done by misapprehending some states of consciousness that people slip into. And if you can just be like, yeah, like you're pretty close, but you just gotta like chill out and recognize like, what, just like take a beat. And when you feel kind of balanced, pursue it from that place rather than just trying to like, what happened for me then, like I just kept scaling the ladder of ascension, the spiral of ascension, but I didn't like stop along the way to get my bearings. So like I went up to the top and then like I fizzled out and I like crashed down. What's different this time is like when I got to the top, like I had systematically done it in a way that protected me going up, and I had like remembrance of what I was doing. So I could go back down, I could meet people at different levels of it, and that has been the most like, that's what I'm most grateful and thankful for, because before when it was happening to me, I was just like a Looney Tune. Like, and I say that lovingly now. Like, I was right. I was right. Like, I was right about a lot of the stuff I was saying, but the way it's coming out of me, like, I was thinking about this. You're going to be the first person to hear it. Do you ever watch Futurama?
A little bit. Not a lot, but yeah.
All right. Well, there's an episode where Fry, the main character, finds like this instrument, and like you can play this instrument, and like whatever you play on the instrument actually creates like a holographic world in front of you, and he sucks at it. So it's like this disgusting monster is created when he plays it, but when he like gets this like special like thing that makes him amazing, he can play and he's just built the most beautiful worlds. The way I describe it is like back then I had the same information, it was still in my head, but like I didn't know how to play this instrument effectively to communicate it. So it was just like like, and everyone's like, yo, this sucks, shut up. Now it's like I actually know how to play the instrument. I learned it, so I'm like, hey, check this out. And people are like, yo, okay, all right, I'm into it. So that's what I think is pretty much the way I describe, the ladder of ascension.
So we're coming up on the end here. I just wanted to say I'm a big fan of words, and one word that I've heard you use a lot lately is the word grok. The word,
that's a good word.
If you can grok that concept. And I think people should check out your, syncpodcast.com. It's part of the MindPod network. You can find them on Instagram at Noah Lampert, as well as on Twitter and any podcast apps. Just put in Noah Lampert. As you see here, you can find him. We're coming up on the end of the show already because time waits for no one. And we got about a minute here. Aside from your podcast, aside from your life's craft, what are just the simple things you enjoy in life that bring you happiness or joy? If you know,
Music, my family, weed, apples, honey, animals, sex, crystals, tarot, astrology, fucking everything pretty much. Like
yeah, I like
I
the
really love pretty much everything. And I'm even beginning to love the things that I thought I hated. So that's
I
interesting
really
too.
like the tarot card readings you've been doing on your Instagram for the artwork. I think those are
Yeah.
great, and it's a good tool to, try to grok the situation you're in. Maybe
Yeah, man.
misappropriation of that word, but yeah. So those are all good things, and definitely have heard sex a couple times on the show. I interview a lot of different people. Got 11 seconds left. Anything you want to shout out real quick?
Uh, you're God. Everyone's God. Don't forget it. Imagination creates reality.
Hey, time always remember.